So we are going to be talking about when a leader becomes a lost sheep, when a leader falls. This is one of those messages that speaks really deeply into my heart because I'm a leader. And anybody who's a leader knows that there's a lot of people that are depending on you, and there's a lot of things that depend on you. And if you were to have a moral failure, do something wrong, mess things up, then your mess up can affect a lot of people. And so this message that we're going to be looking at, this story that we're going to be looking at, we're really going to kind of slow down. We've been covering big chunks of Scripture, but we're going to slow it down. We're just going to cover a few chapters today because I believe it is really important, especially for those of us who lead. And believe me, everybody leads. Eventually you will lead. And so this message is important for all of us. All right, so we have been talking about how God has been working in his people, the people of Israel. Remember, he's been trying to reverse the curse, if you will. Basically in the opening chapters of the Bible, everything went wrong, right? Everything went wrong. And then God called this man named Abraham and said, hey, I'm going to give you some land. I'm going to give you numerous descendants. And all nations, all people, all families are going to be blessed through you. And so the point in the story right now is that we're with Israel. They have received their land. Okay, they've got their land. They've become a numerous people. But they still have not become a blessing to all nations. Now, maybe they've become a blessing to some peoples, a few peoples, right? But they still have not become this blessing to all nations. So that's what we're kind of looking for. We're just waiting to see in the story, when does this happen? When does this happen? Well, a few weeks ago, again, we talked about how the people of Israel had transitioned. They transitioned from a time of judges to a time of kings. And the first king was a guy by the name of Saul. You remember? Nod your head if you remember Saul. So you remember Saul. Was he a good king? Shake your head. No, he was not a good king, right? God rejected Saul. And so God chose a man after his own heart, a guy by the name of David. And David has been installed as king, and he's on the throne, and things are rolling. Things are going great. He subdues the Philistines. He conquers Moab, a neighboring country. He defeats the king of Zobah and his mercenaries. And God is making David basically successful everywhere he goes. Like everything is going well for David. So I just want to start off in 2 Samuel chapter 8. And we're going to be looking at verse 15. This just kind of sums up what's been going on with David so far. 2 Samuel chapter 8, verse 15. So David reigned over all Israel and did what was just and right for all his people. So everything's going well, right? It's going great for David. In fact, the very next chapter you read about something that's even more commendable for David. Okay, so he finds out that there is a grandson of Saul, the former king, a guy by the name of Mephibosheth, who is crippled. And David actually takes care of him. Now, does anybody know, in the ancient world, what was the normal practice for descendants from the king? Rick's already doing it, right? It was death. Off with his head, right? That's what you did. If there was anybody that was descended from the former king, you killed him. And so David is just a special kind of leader. He's not doing what the nations and the people around him are doing. He's a special kind of guy. And he's a special king. And then in chapter 10, we read that there's a change of power next door. So next door, there's a nation called the Ammonites, and there's a change of power. A new king comes to power, and David sends some emissaries, some ambassadors to go and try to make peace with this new king of the Ammonites. Well, the new king of the Ammonites doesn't like David for some reason or another. I mean, maybe it's because he's killed a lot of people. But he doesn't like David for one reason or another, and he actually humiliates David's ambassadors. And so David ends up going to war with the Ammonites. And, it's this long kind of drawn-out battle. a huge battle ensues, and David and the Israelite army, they defeat the Ammonites, and they defeat some of the mercenaries that were hired by the Ammonites. But the battle wasn't over. But if you know anything about this time, this place, this location, this geographical location, when it came to the winter months, battles had to stop because the weather just got too crazy. And so the armies would draw back into their various kingdoms, and then they would wait for the spring when it was time to go back out to war. Okay, and so that's when we pick up the story here in 2 Samuel chapter 11. So the battle's not over. The Ammonites they've been defeated, but the threat's not over. 2 Samuel chapter 11, starting in verse 1. In the spring of the year, when kings normally go out to war, David sent Joab and the Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. They destroyed the Ammonite army and laid siege to the city of Rabbah. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. So immediately we see a problem, right? There's a problem. David is not where he is supposed to be. Things have been going well. He is winning. So he's going to stay back in the city and enjoy the comforts of home while the army goes out and fights their battles without their king, without their leader, their motivator, and their strategist, right? Have you ever heard the phrase, idle hands are the devil's playground? How many people have heard that? Okay. Let's pick up the story, verse 2. 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 2. Late one afternoon, after his midday rest, he's even taking a midday rest, David got out of bed and was walking on the roof of the palace. As he looked out over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. He sent someone to find out who she was, and he was told, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Then David sent messengers to get her, and when she came to the palace, he slept with her. She had just completed the purification rites after having her menstrual period. Then she returned home. So, Uriah the Hittite finds out that this woman belongs to a man, or not belongs, but is married to a man named Uriah the Hittite. And you kind of have to look in other places in Scripture to find out just who this guy is. So in 1 Chronicles chapter 11, we find out more about Uriah. The accounts that are found in 1st and 2nd Chronicles were actually written about 200 years after the accounts of 1st and 2nd Kings, and they're written for a different purpose. And they include a few more details and some other things about the stories that we read in 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. And what we find out about Uriah is that he is actually one of David's 30 mighty men. In other words, a special person in David's army. And I actually, this is who I believe that Uriah is. I believe Uriah is one of those guys, because he's not an Israelite. He's a Hittite. He's not an Israelite. I believe he's one of those guys who actually showed up with David when he was on the run from Saul. So he's been with David. He's been fighting for David for years. He knows David. He's been through thick and thin with David. And David finds out that this woman is the wife of Uriah the Hittite, one of his 30 mighty warriors that are listed in the book of Chronicles. And he calls her to his palace, and he sleeps with her. And there's an important application at this point that just kind of jumps off the page at me. And you're probably thinking it as well. And that's this. It's often when things are going well and we are doing our best that we are most susceptible to a fall. Have you ever noticed this in your life? When everything is just kind of evened out, when everything is just kind of calmed down, when your guard is down, this is the moment when we are most vulnerable. David has a job to do. He's supposed to be out finishing what he started back in the fall, but instead he's like, Joab, you've got this. I don't need to worry about this. And so, David is just walking around in his palace, nothing to do, just kind of twiddling his thumbs and nothing to worry about. And then sin rises and we're tempted. So there's this kind of weird detail that's included there. You probably noticed it. Did you notice it? That she finished her menstrual period, right? It's like, what? That's a weird detail to include. But I think that what's going on there is that we're told why Bathsheba is on the roof. Okay, she's on the roof doing what Jewish women did, which is doing the cleansing rituals, the bathing rituals that were required after women finished their period. She was not up there trying to seduce David. I've heard some preachers talk about how she was up there trying to seduce David and that they try to pin this on Bathsheba. I don't think that's the case at all. She's not trying to catch the king's eye. She's just doing what she's supposed to be doing. And David is the one who inquires about her and brings her to his palace. Let's keep reading verse 5. Later, when Bathsheba discovered that she was pregnant, she sent David a message saying, "I am pregnant." So David hatches a plan. He comes up with a plan to try to cover up his indiscretion, to cover up his sin. And so he brings Uriah home from the battle lines, and he tries to get Uriah to go home and to sleep with his wife and cover up David's despicable deed. And Uriah's response is powerful. Look at verse 11. Uriah replied, "The ark and the armies of Israel and Judah are living in tents, and Joab and my master's men are camping in the open fields. How could I go home to wine and dine and sleep with my wife? I swear that I would never do such a thing." There's another takeaway that jumps off the page at this moment, and that is that our integrity confronts evil and deception. Uriah knows where he is supposed to be, right? He knows where he's supposed to be. He knows what he's supposed to be doing, and David does not. David has shirked his duties. He's allowed himself to be caught up in one of the most despicable things that someone can possibly do, and that is cheating with not just someone else's wife, but with a friend's wife, and then trying to cover it up, right? He's done one of the most evil things. And Uriah doesn't know that his words should be convicting to David and to what he has done. But David is so caught up in covering up his sin that Uriah's words fall short. And David doesn't hear them. Do you ever wonder if you're making a difference when you're doing the right thing? Have you ever wondered that in your heart? Like, just, am I really making a difference just by doing the right thing? And I just want to encourage you that, yes, you are making a difference. When you choose to do the right thing, even when other people are doing the wrong thing, you indirectly but directly confront evil and deception that is going on within people's hearts and in their lives. But when you fall in with the crowd, you just let it happen, right? You're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. So then David moves on to plan B. He sends instructions with Uriah to Joab the commander. Sends instructions with Uriah to Joab the commander that would ultimately result in Uriah's death. The Israelites would attack the city of Rabbah, and then everybody would fall back except for Uriah. And Uriah would be killed. And this leads me to a third takeaway, and that is this, that cover-ups cause us to devalue the good things in our lives. Cover-ups cause us to devalue the good things in our lives. Uriah is one of David's men, right? He's probably a friend. We don't know how close they were, but they were close enough to where David could invite Uriah over to the palace. And if my suspicion is correct that Uriah had joined David while he was on the run, these two had been through all kinds of things together. Uriah was a loyal and true man, and we see that by his refusal to go home and to sleep with his wife while his compadres are on the battlefront. Is this thing just cutting out over and over and over again? I don't know if it's maybe my phone is doing it. I don't know. But Uriah is a good guy. But David is so concerned about his reputation that he ultimately throws away the value of the person of Uriah in order to cover up his sin. And this is what I can tell you, and this is what I've seen happen in my life and in the lives of others. When we live a secretive life, hiding the wrong things that we're doing, lying, we are basically saying that our happiness is more important than our relationships and the meaningful people in our lives. And our kids and our spouses and our friends pay the price because of our lack of transparency. I just want to encourage all of us, don't live a lie. Come clean. You actually show the people that around you that you love them by coming clean and telling the truth. So Uriah, as I said, was killed. Let's pick up the story in verse 26. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. When the period of mourning was over, David sent for her and brought her to the palace, and she became one of his wives. And then she gave birth to a son. It seems like the cover-up goes as planned, doesn't it? But the very next part of that verse, but the Lord was displeased with what David had done. You know, I've always wondered, what's going on in the palace during all of this? I mean, people had to know what was happening, right? Because David sends people to inquire about Bathsheba. He brings Bathsheba back to the palace. Like, people had to know. Servants had to know. You know, advisors had to know. But nobody is saying anything to David about it. I mean, his commander, Joab, is complicit with murder. We don't know exactly all that Joab knew, but we do know that he arranges for Uriah's death. He just does what David says without question. It seems to me like David, as we read this, it seems to me like David has gotten away with one of the most evil things that you can imagine. I mean, it's way worse than what Saul did. Like, Saul disobeyed God. David has killed, and he slept with his wife, and then he got her pregnant, and then killed the man to cover it up, right? And nobody's saying anything to him, and so therefore God has to send Nathan, a prophet, to David. And Nathan the prophet shows up, and I don't know exactly where David met this prophet at. You know, it could have been in a place where he received his guests. It could have been in his inner chambers. But in comes Nathan, and he says, David, I have a story to tell you. And the story is this. There's two men. One rich, and the other is poor. The rich man has sheep and cattle galore, like more than you can count. So many that, you know, he doesn't even know how many he has. And the poor man who lives just a short distance away from the rich man has one little lamb. And that little lamb is being raised in the poor man's house like one of his children. The lamb eats from his plate. He cuddles in his arms, and he sleeps in his bed. And when the rich man had a traveler come through, and this wasn't a very important traveler, and so the rich man didn't want to use one of his sheep or one of his cattle to slaughter for his guests, so he instead takes the poor man's lamb that was being raised in his household. He slaughters the lamb, and he serves it to his guest. Listen to David's response to this story. Chapter 12, verse 5. David was furious. As surely as the Lord lives, he vowed, any man who would do such a thing deserves to die. He must repay 4 lambs to the poor man for the one he stole, for having no pity. Then Nathan said to David, you are that man. You are that man. You know what I've noticed? When people are living a double life, when they're hiding and covering up, not dealing with their own stuff, their reactions are over the top. People get on Facebook all the time and they just blast everybody. They see something that happens or they hear about something that happens and they're just like behind their keyboard and just typing away and like, look at how awful and terrible this is. And the reason that we get so caught up in all those things is so that we don't have to deal with our own stuff, right? And so often when we're living this two-faced life, we get so upset about all the injustices around us because we don't want to deal with the things that are going on in our own hearts. And that's what's going on with David. But one way or another, Nathan's going to come. We will be convicted, and our cover-up will be stripped away, and we will be shown for who we are. You can't get away with it. We don't get away with it. Keep reading second half of verse 7, chapter 12. Nathan continues. He says, the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I anointed you king of Israel and saved you from the power of Saul. I gave you your master's house and his wives and the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. And if that had not been enough, I would have given you much more. I would have given you so much. Why then have you despised the word of the Lord and done this horrible deed? For you have murdered Uriah the Hittite with the sword of the Ammonites and stolen his wife. From this time on, your family will live by the sword, because you have despised me by taking Uriah's wife to be your own. This is what the Lord says. Because of what you have done, I will cause your own household to rebel against you. I will give your wives to another man before your very eyes, and he will go to bed with them in public view. You did it secretly, but I will make this happen to you openly in the sight of all Israel. Skip to verse 14. Because you have shown utter contempt for the word of the Lord by doing this, your child will die. The final takeaway is this. There will be consequences for our actions. There will be consequences for our actions. Our actions will either draw us toward God or away from God. And our actions also affect other people. We cannot act in a vacuum. There will be spillover. Your sin cannot be committed and not affect the people around you. And when we are living in a cover-up, we will hurt the ones that we love. It's only a matter of time. And our lack of integrity will lead other people to do the same. So Nathan the prophet says that somebody else is going to sleep with David's wives in the open. You keep reading this story, you'll find out that the person who does it is actually David's son, Absalom. It comes true. And I have to believe that the reason that Absalom acted that way is because he was following the example of his father. Our actions will always have consequences. We often think that our actions will only affect us. But the reality is that our actions will always affect those around us. Innocent people often suffer because of our poor choices. Driving drunk, covering up an addiction. We can go on and on. People will suffer because of our poor choices. And I know that today's story is not one of those stories that's all rainbows and unicorns. It's like one of the darkest stories about a man who is said to be a man after God's own heart. But it's a reminder to those of us who lead, we are always one choice and one cover-up away from disaster. And I just want to encourage all of us, if you are living in sin, if you are living with a hidden reality in your heart that you think you can just keep covered up and that's not going to affect anybody around you, I just want to tell you, and I just want to plead with you, come clean. Come clean. The people in your life who love you, if you come clean, they will love you even more. I mean, they may be hurt, but it's a whole lot better than them having to find out in another way. Come clean. Don't hide your sin. So today, we're talking about when leaders fall. Next Sunday, we'll have part 2, when leaders fall. And we'll look at David's response to all of this, because I want to show you that there's actually a pretty incredible part to the story. But today, I just kind of want to soak in this moment. And I want us to just acknowledge that when you lead, whether you're leading your family, whether you're leading a team, whether you're leading at work, whether you're leading in the church, whether you're leading a team, whatever it is, if you lead, the more responsibility you have and the more terrible things can happen from a fall. And I just hope that we will all take this seriously and remember that we cannot keep it hidden. I want to invite the worship team to come up. And I again, just want to encourage you to remember these lessons from David. Are things going well for you? Are things going good? I'll just remind you that you are susceptible to a fall. I also want to encourage you, always maintain your integrity, like Uriah did. You may think that it doesn't make a difference, but it does, and it will directly confront the evil and the deception of our world. Remember also that cover-ups cause us to devalue the good things in our lives. And remember, there's always consequences for your actions. Today, as our worship team leads this song, if there's something that you need to get off your chest, if there's something that you need to talk to somebody about, do we have any of our prayer team here today? We have just a few people, members of our prayer team today. I just want to encourage you all to go in the back. And if there's something that you need to talk about, talk to one of these people. I'll be up here at the front. If you want to come talk to me, let me know. But please do not allow the sin to stay hidden in your life. Don't follow the example of David in this area. Let's stand and let's sing together.